Welcome to This Week in South Carolina. I'm Gavin Jackson. Since the start of the pandemic, many families across the state have struggled financially. Some have even been evicted since a federal eviction moratorium was removed in late August. We talk with the South Carolina Housing Authority about SC State Plus, a program that assists those still facing financial hardships to pay rent and utilities. But first, Lynn Teague, the Vice President of Issues and Action with the League of Women Voters, joins us to talk redistricting and what it means for the citizens of South Carolina. Lynn, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So Lynn, just kind of give us an overview of this process, where the state stands right now, and what we saw in the latest census figures, and how this process works in South Carolina.
Okay, this is a process that's required every 10 years to bring our legislative districts into line with our current population. And South Carolina's population has changed a great deal, as it turns out, in the past 10 years. There has been very substantial population growth on the coast, especially around Horry, Myrtle Beach, and so forth, but all along the coast, and also south of Charlotte in the northern part of the state. Basically, bedroom communities and outliers for the city of Charlotte have come pretty far into South Carolina and have produced major population change there. At the same time, there are areas that have not grown. Mm-hmm. The I-95 corridor in general has not grown, and in some cases has actually lost a little population. And so we are now in the process of having to make sure that all of our districts have roughly equal population. That's the one person, one vote principle. And at the moment, they don't. So the districts that are going to be redrawn are our U.S. House of Representatives and the South Carolina Senate and House. Mm-hmm. And the Senate and House have their separate processes. They both do congressional maps and have to reach agreement on a map, but each of them pretty much leaves the other alone on their own maps. Mm-hmm. One specialist that we work with referred to this as the danger of mutually assured destruction if they went after each other's maps.
That's an apt description right there.
Right. Now, the league regards this as the most fundamental thing that's happening because to a large extent it determines whether our votes matter in November. Mm-hmm. Demography determines that too, just the distribution of population.
And so, Lynn, kind of walk us through this process. Like we've been seeing, there's been hearings going on across the state. Like you said, this is something that happens every 10 years. The legislature gets involved in this and drawing these maps. We got the 7th Congressional District in 2012 as a result of the 2010 census. That was a seat we lost back in the 30s. We didn't gain a seat this go around, but probably in the next census, we might, just based on the population trends and the growth. So kind of walk us through who makes these decisions within the Senate and the House when it comes to redrawing these maps.
The individual legislators working with map drawers, both houses have hired specialists, legal specialists and technical specialists. Everybody uses Maptitude, which is a piece of software that the League also uses to draw our own maps. But the legislators meet individually with the map teams generally to look at their own districts. And I will just say that, we had hoped for an independent process because legislators' self-interest is deeply, deeply embedded in how this process goes. And it's very hard to put self-interest totally aside and say, what's best for voters? And there is an inclination for incumbents to think of the districts as their districts, not the voters' districts.
Mm-hmm. And that's on both sides of the aisle, of course, but obviously Republican-controlled Senate and House, though, but still, everyone has their vested interest, like you're saying.
Well, it actually is probably the most bipartisan thing that happens usually in the General Assembly.
Interesting.
Everybody, as one legislator put it to me, every man for himself. Mm-hmm. But that is, in fact, our concern. The League tries to do our homework. And as part of that, one of our board members is, in fact, a math professor at Clemson, and he oversaw a master's thesis on are our districts gerrymandered now for partisan advantage? Because everybody, a lot of people think they are. Mm-hmm. And after millions of simulations being run on a supercomputer, we found they're not. Huh. There is at present no artificial partisan gerrymander. There is a partisan bias, and it can be attributed mostly to the distribution of population because parts of the population are differently distributed in the state. The other thing that's going on to make districts non-competitive is, in fact, that incumbent protection issue. Everybody wants their district to be safe. A safe district is good for incumbents and rotten for voters because it means they don't have to pay any attention to the voter, really, and their election's over after the primary.
Yeah, we've seen some big surprising upsets too, though, not even based on redistricting, but also just demographic changes in the state we can talk about in a moment. But I want to ask you about some big U.S. Supreme Court decisions recently in the past 10 years that will affect how these maps are drawn and how they get approved. Obviously, the Voting Rights Act was central to a lot of these maps being drawn over the years since the 60s. Obviously, a big decision in 2013 was removing pre-approval by the Department of Justice for states that had a history with racial discrimination in voting to get federal approval, South Carolina being one of them. That's no longer going to be an issue. How concerned is the league about that being removed and how that's going to affect this process?
We are concerned. Lacking pre-clearance now, and it means that elections, you have to come in after the fact if there's a problem. You have to wait till the lines are drawn. The pre-clearance process, we believe, should have been retained. We wish it would be restored. While we don't see a lot of artificial partisan gerrymander at present in South Carolina, that doesn't mean it can't be done. It certainly can be done, and without pre-clearance, that danger is greater. There are also other decisions of the federal Supreme Court that affect this. They have rejected trying to adjudicate issues based on partisan gerrymander. So they're going to want to only deal with racial gerrymanders.
And we've tried to, in the past, there have been lawsuits against that too, but they haven't really gone anywhere. Essentially, they've been rejected. Do you think that we'll be seeing similar lawsuits regardless of what comes out of these maps going forward?
I don't think necessarily regardless of what comes out of the maps, but there are some problems in our current maps that if they aren't fixed would certainly lead to some folks going to court. Although I was recently kidded in a committee meeting by a senator about needing attorneys of my own. In fact, we're not the ones with lots of attorneys for this issue. There are fabulous organizations out there like the NAACP Legal Defense Fund who are true experts on this. And, if, for example, District 6, Congressional District 6, remains with the high level of minority population that it has now, that would likely provoke litigation because it is not at the moment meeting the legal standard that it needs to be narrowly tailored to the Voting Rights Act requirement that minorities have a right to elect someone of their choice. It's way beyond that.
Yeah, we're talking about a PAC district essentially, in Jim Clyburn's district right there, and possibly a lawsuit to unpack that, like we've seen in some other states in the same Fourth Circuit District Court of Appeals as we are. So, do you see that as a potential, like you just said, a potential ramification of what comes of this?
If the General Assembly doesn't unpack that district, the courts are very likely to do it for them. And especially when you consider that there are multiple minorities in the state now, and that data on how people vote suggests that Hispanics and Asians and so forth, other smaller minority groups than our traditional African American minority group, tend to vote in pretty much the same way in many ways as the Black population. And so you have to consider all of them. You can't ignore the fact that it's complex.
And Lynn, when we talk about unpacking the 6th congressional district, what kind of ramifications will that have for those surrounding districts? It's the only Democratic district in the state. Obviously, the 1st congressional district is very close. It's been very competitive, at least in 2018, 2020, with Joe Cunningham flipping that long-held Republican seat in 2018, but then Nancy Mace getting it back in 2020. Sounds like there could be ramifications since the 6th and the 1st are right next to each other in terms of how this could play out in the future if there is a lawsuit based on this.
Yes, actually, it's interesting that the first and the sixth are each currently off by almost exactly the same percentage of population.
Hmm.
The first has about 11 point something percent too much. The sixth has 11 point something percent too little. But if they were to um, I don't believe that the impact on surrounding districts will be to create a second voting rights district, a majority minority district. I don't think that's going to happen anywhere, but who knows? Um, but when it will certainly lead to a better voice for those minorities if their voice isn't diluted by being packed into one district.
Hmm.
They should be able to both elect someone of their choice and influence legislation in the adjoining districts if that's where they're appropriately placed.
Hmm. Yeah, because right now you would think that, before any lawsuit happens, that the first congressional district is a place where Republicans would at least want to maybe shore it up and make it a stronger Republican district just based on what we saw in 2018 and 2020.
Yeah, right. I think both parties are going to take a huge interest in how the imbalance between six and one is resolved.
Some good place to watch right there. You guys,
Absolutely.
the League of Women Voters will be putting out maps soon. I was wondering if maybe you could tell us a little bit about what you guys are looking at in terms of, the House or Senate districts here in the state or the congressional districts. What are you guys looking at? What's your criteria? The Senate and these other committees have their own criteria. Are you in line with that criteria, or how do you guys mesh with what they're doing?
Our criteria differ. We have National League criteria. The League is very systematic about these things. Our essential criteria are the legally essential ones of equal population and contiguity. You can't just have a district made up of spots across the map, and protecting the voting rights of minority populations. Beyond that, though, we do not want to prioritize protecting incumbents or protecting a party. And so our next order of magnitude is communities of interest, especially the ones that can be objectively applied without dispute, the county lines where we have county government administering a lot of what happens within an area, counties, municipalities, precincts. We like to leave those whole when we can, not split them up. Communities of interest can be used as a wild card. We've heard communities of interest defined in terms of, well, people go to restaurants over there. Um, but we think it needs a stronger argument. If something is a bedroom community for a bigger city, that is a serious community of interest. But if, there are various ways it would be defined. But as much as possible, the League wants to stick to those interests. If all else if all those can be satisfied, then we would go to compactness. Basically, the aesthetics of a district don't bother us. They can look, a good district can look pretty strange sometimes. And competitiveness. And we really think competitiveness is extremely important, but we didn't want to try to insert a lot of political data into our analysis. And so what we are looking for is not reducing competitiveness when possible. And we have a team of mathematicians who are going to analyze all of this for us. And next week we will be introducing our own maps, and anybody who can sign up and go to the Zoom event to see our maps and hear how they were designed at our website, which is www.lwvsc.org.
And Lynn, just to clarify, you mentioned this too, not putting too much political data into those maps when you're running these simulations. It's nonpartisan, essentially. The League of Women Voters nonpartisan stance on this.
We are nonpartisan, and our maps will be entirely nonpartisan. And I can say, since we're still working on some odds and ends on the House map, our Senate and congressional maps are done. And I can say that there will be things for both parties to like and both parties to hate.
Oh, I love that. We need more of that, don't we? But really quick, Lynn, just kind of wrapping up here. It seems like you mentioned early on about how everyone's kind of out for themselves. It kind of works right now as the way it is. And it's my understanding when we look back, it seemed like 2000 and the 2001 process was a big turning point for, kind of solidifying the current status quo. Can you have a historical perspective about how this has been playing out in the past few decades in South Carolina, and if this process, this go around, is going to be any different from what we've seen in terms of, the deal making, the self-preservation in these maps?
Well, I don't see any reduction in attempts to, we'll see what they produce. But deal making and self-preservation are always going to be huge factors. And, we're analyzing our own maps carefully. We're going to analyze their maps carefully. And where we think they have artificially looked after themselves rather than the voter, creating a safe district artificially. There's some places in the state that are always going to be safe for one party or the other, given current population, but there are others that are manipulated. When we see that happening, we intend to call people out on it.
Yes.
We intend to make that public.
Very good. And just with 30 seconds left, where does this go from here? Obviously, the public input is still going on right now, but how is this going to play out in the months ahead?
Okay, well, both House and Senate are busy, very busy in the background there, and people are starting to work in the map rooms with the map drawers. We expect the General Assembly to come back with their maps to the floor of the House and the Senate in December. We had thought they were pushing for an earlier date. President Peeler of the Senate has put out that they're going to talk redistricting in early October, but we don't think they're going to be ready. The House is certain not to be ready. In the interim, there will be a point at which they introduce their own maps, and we hope taking into account, to the extent possible, the public input that they've gotten in these hearings.
Very good. Well, we'll leave it there, Lynn. And that's Lynn Teague. She's the Vice President of Issues and Action with the League of Women Voters of South Carolina. Lynn, thanks for that update, and we'll be following along with you in the months ahead.
Thank you.
Chris Winston is the Chief Communications Officer at SC Housing, and he's here to talk to us about the latest rental assistance program that his agency is administering. Chris, thanks for coming back.
My pleasure, Kevin. Thanks so much for having us.
So, Chris, the last time we talked was in February, and we were talking about a different rental assistance plan. Kind of catch us up since then, what happened with that plan and what we're doing with right now.
Absolutely. So the original plan program was called SC Stay. It was a HUD-funded program that was helping South Carolina residents with rental and mortgage assistance. And the application window for that was closed in a very short period of time. We had a lot of applications come in very quickly. And that program, last time I saw, had distributed more than $10 million out to residents of South Carolina. So it was followed fairly quickly on the heels of another much larger program that we've really been focusing on since May. And that's the SC Stay Plus program. And this is Treasury funded, more than $250 million to assist residents in 39 South Carolina counties with rental and utility assistance. So we've really been working hard in the last few months to help thousands of people stay safely in their homes. Since the eviction moratorium ended a few weeks ago, due to action by the Supreme Court, we've seen more than 8,000 applications come in. So it's definitely increased the urgency just recently. And we're working feverishly right now to get as many people assistance as possible so they don't get displaced from their homes.
Well, and Chris, kind of tell us who can qualify for this program. Is it based on income? Is it based on status? What are the qualifications here?
Yeah, absolutely. So you just need to live in one of 39 South Carolina counties. People who live in Anderson, Greenville, Spartanburg, Richland, Horry, Charleston, and Berkeley have their own programs.
Okay.
And you can find information about their programs also on schousing.com. But if you're in one of the other 39 counties, some very large counties, Beaufort, Lexington, York, et cetera, we can assist. You have to be a renter, so you have to show that you have some sort of rental arrangement. And a lot of people don't have formal leases, but you have to show that you've been paying someone at some point to live in a residence. And then we have an income validation that we ask you to verify that you're making less than 80% of the area median income. There's a chart. Every county has its own numbers based on your household size, based on where you live. So there is an income piece. But if you're a renter, if you've lost your work or been unemployed over the last 18 months, then you probably qualify. And we encourage everybody to come to schousing.com and look to see if we can provide assistance if you're behind on your rent.
Gotcha. And then, Chris, kind of you were talking about just how big of this program is. Congress approved $46.5 billion in emergency rental assistance. Only $5.1 billion in aid has gone up by the end of last month. 19 million of the 272 million that came to the state of South Carolina has gone out. It took a long time to get that money out the door too. I mean, even by June, only $36,000 has gone out. You had that other program going. Why? Tell us a little bit why it took so long to get this money really rolling.
Yeah, so South Carolina Housing was named the administrator of the program on April 16th. Governor McMaster signed Act 17 to name us the administrator. We launched our program 3 weeks later, the first week of May. And we tried to follow very strict guidelines to ensure that just the people who needed help received assistance. And so we initially asked for 5 or 6 different pieces of information from applicants. And what we realized at the end of June is that people were struggling to come up with all 5 of those pieces of documentation. Treasury, at the same time, luckily for us, on June 24th, I believe it was, issued new guidance encouraging states and encouraging municipalities to get funding out and be more relaxed in their documentation. So by early July, we started changing. We allowed more self-attestation for if you're housing insecure, if you're at risk of eviction. We allow self-attestation for if you've been impacted financially by COVID. And then what we did was we identified 196 zip codes where we're allowing you to self-attest to that income requirement, because the average rents and the average incomes in those areas mean you overwhelmingly probably qualify for the program. So rather than you having to provide documentation, we're allowing you to self-attest. Mm-hmm. So just moving from 5 pieces of documentation to 2 or 3 really allowed us in July and August to start generating millions of dollars of payments out to landlords on behalf of tenants, and sometimes the tenants directly. And we're seeing that number grow. I think we're over 22 million now. I think we've approved maybe 24 million as of last week. And so we're really seeing the doors open at the urging of representatives, state government, federal government, the Biden administration, to get more support out to residents.
And like you're saying, I mean, there is an urgent need for this money to go out to folks affected by the pandemic who are behind on their rent. I've seen some figures. I wonder if you can maybe enlighten us with some numbers and what we're seeing in terms of people who could possibly be evicted, especially since, like you said, that moratorium for evictions was lifted at the end of August there.
Yeah, I think when you look at census data, Pulse survey, it's a very small number, but if you extrapolate that out, there have been any number of range from, say, 80,000 to 150,000 households in South Carolina at risk of eviction during this time period. People who reported to the census that they were unsure that they would be able to make their next rental payment.
Wow.
So you look at that kind of number, I think we've seen between 20 and 30,000 applicants come to our program. I don't know the exact numbers, but you've seen thousands of applicants also come in through those 7 large county government programs as well. So I think what you're probably seeing is probably on in that scale of 80 to 100 and some thousand, 120, 140,000 who are behind on rent, who are now worried about being evicted or being displaced. And those are our neighbors, and those are our friends, and those are our relatives. We're trying to help as many of as possible right now.
And Chris, is this a crisis at this point when it comes to possible evictions? We're talking about upwards of 150,000 people that could be evicted in 2 months.
I think without these assistance programs and the great work that the county government's doing, state government, you've seen obviously other stimulus support get out in the child tax credit. You've seen expanded and extended unemployment benefits. You've seen people receive tax refunds that don't typically get them. I think it very easily could have been one, and it could still be one. At this point, we think there's funding obviously available through our program. The counties have funding available. That we're doing everything we can to prevent it from getting to that point.
Mm-hmm. And are landlords reaching out to you too, or is this primarily driven by tenants? I mean, I would assume since maybe they know more about what's going on with this always being in the news and such, that they want to prevent evicting someone too if they can get some of this assistance.
Yeah, we've seen tremendous support and partnership, help with folks like the South Carolina Realtors Association and landlord groups and property management groups. We have an opportunity on our website for landlords to recommend to their tenants the program. They can come in and start putting their own landlord information in, and then that generates emails and information out to tenants to apply. We've seen a lot of them really support their tenants, come in and help with paperwork, help with documentation. Like you said, to keep from evicting folks, what a lot of our property managers and landlords don't want to do. And B, it's an opportunity for them to catch up on funds that they've had to go without for the last 18 months in some cases because of the different eviction moratoria that have been in place.
Gotcha. And we have about a minute left, Chris. I want to ask you just about those other programs. Obviously, you guys are over 39 counties, but like you mentioned, there are 7 counties that are doing their own programs. Do you know how those have been going and if they've been suffering some of the same bottlenecks as you guys have?
I think what you look at folks like this week, I was on a call with Columbia Housing Authority and Richland County, and Mike King over there has done a tremendous job. They've worked through a lot of their millions of dollars that they had already, really being in person, on the ground applicant support, which is a struggle when you have 39 counties, right? Being everywhere in every county. But just recently, we've signed some deals with some nonprofit organizations, community groups, and here in the next couple of weeks, we'll be announcing a lot more opportunities for in-person applicant support, so that people across the state, especially in rural areas, especially where people might be challenged with technology or online applications, can get support where they live. And we're following the example of some of the great counties like we've seen Charleston and Richland have done a great job of getting not only the word out about the program, but obviously assisting applicants.
Great. A lot of work going on there, too. And just in the nick of time, it sounds like. That's Chris Winson. He's with the SC Housing Authority. You can find out more information at schousing.com. Chris, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
To stay up to date with the latest news throughout the week, check out the South Carolina Lead. It's a podcast that I host twice a week, and you can find it on southcarolinapublicradio.org or wherever you find podcasts. For South Carolina ETV, I'm Gavin Jackson. Be well, South Carolina.